Hey everybody, welcome back. The patch is here. Update 9 is finally here. That's right, it's time for another update Roundup. Now this update is by far the biggest that we've had. I said that about 7, I said that about 8, and I'm saying that again about 9. And it's taking a really long time to come out, darn near 2 months. Now the devs are well aware that this has impacted things, and they've added some comments to the patch notes to give a little bit of explanation, and I thought it was important enough to share. So first, according to them, patches from here on out should come out a lot more regularly, and this is going to be the last one that has major implications, major impacts. The point of this patch was to get all of the beginning level stuff squared away, which is why Iskall decided to restart his single-player world. And I don't blame him, honestly. A lot has changed since this game first came out, especially regarding the starting game. So to reiterate, the beginning game should be very stable now and shouldn't change all that much. They know there's a lot of work to do on the end game, and that is still going to be changing, but the goal is to make these changes additive instead of replacing things like they have been doing. They also made a special call out about Eternals. They know Eternals are not very good and are definitely working on fixing them in the next patch. We already know that about patch 10, and honestly, I'm looking forward to it. But this is about patch 9, so let's head on over to the test world and dive right in to this update roundup. When you log in for the first time after installing update 9, you'll see a few things that were different. First off, we had the skill reset, and that's up in the upper right-hand corner. We see all of my unspent skill points equal to my level. But you also see that I have a whole bunch of Beniatites and Black Opals, which have also been refunded because I had several skills that were given through skill orbs. That's right, any skill points that you had above your level will be refunded in terms of Beniatite and Black Opal and Vault Essence that it takes to make up the skill orbs that you used to get there. But interestingly, the skill shards, well, they're not refunded. So unfortunately, that's a bit of a waste, because as of update 9, you can no longer make skill orbs or skill shards. Sadly, this is another legacy item left behind by the updates. So let's have a quick burial for our friends. And if you have skill dust or skill shards already in your inventory that you'd already collected, well, all you can really do is feed it into the soul diffuser and get some soul dust for it. Now another thing to be noticed when you log in for the first time, you have this handy dandy quest book in your inventory. That's right, Vault Hunters has a real quest system for guiding new players through all of the ins and outs of the Vault Hunters mod pack. And I expect this will grow over time as things get added, but it looks like it's quite complete. Now unfortunately, there's no crafting recipe for the quest book, so if you lose it, it's gone forever. But that doesn't mean you can't do the quests. By going to the Vault stats on the H screen, down at the bottom tab here, you can still access all of the quests that are in the book. So you don't really even need it, but it certainly does help to get you going. And if you're continuing on in a world and not restarting, well then you still want to do these quests, because you get several rewards for doing the quests as you go along, and one of those is a skill point. And because skill orbs are no longer available in the game, your skill points have a maximum, specifically 101. You can reach level 100 and get 100 skill points that way, and you can complete the quests in this quest book and get an additional point that way for a total of 101. Now also up in the upper right hand corner, you see there are expertise points. Expertise points are brand new to update 9. You get an expertise points for every 5 levels that you complete in the game, and these are meant to be much more permanent choices, meaning you can remove them, but it is extremely expensive. So definitely take the time to evaluate your playstyle before making selection of expertise points. Now, what are we going to use all these things on? Well, there's also been a complete skill revamp. Some things used to be skills, but now they are considered expertises. And basically, skills are things that you tend to use in the vault and are related to combat, and expertise are things that help you generally all around and are not necessarily related to combat. Specifically, the Unbreakable skill and the Lucky Altar skill are things that have been moved to expertise points. But let me get through all of the rest of the changes in this update, and then we'll go over all the skills, because there's a lot of them. So then, moving on, let's take a look at the 4 new blocks that are introduced into the game. The first one here on my right is the Skill Altar. The Skill Altar is a lot like a wardrobe in that it lets you store up certain sets of skills to be easily swapped. So looking at the interface here, it looks like we can use this button to save all of my talents and abilities into the altar. Boom. And then let's say I use a whole bunch of regret points and change some of my skills around. Let's regret a few of these javelins and take a few more heals as well as a few other things. And so now when I come back into this, I can load up this set of abilities for the cost of a certain number of regret orbs, which you populate in this field right here. Ah, nice. And it can even be overstacked, just like a lot of the other Vault tools. So pressing this button will reset all of my abilities to what's stored in here. And later on, if I want to change things around, I can press this button again. Also, this toggle button will lock the save ability so you can't accidentally overwrite the skill set that you have in your altar here. Furthermore, this one skill altar can handle multiple skill sets. So if we've got yet another skill set that I want to save off, well, we'll just save this one now in a new tab. I don't really see a way to change the presentation of each of these tabs, but maybe there is, and I'm just not finding it. Regardless, this hand tab is how you create a new skill set saving. So this is pretty cool. This is, like I said, this is a lot like the wardrobe, but allows you to have multiple skill sets, or builds as they call them, within the game. And when it comes to making the skill altar, well, it's not that bad. 3 black chromatic steel is pretty darn expensive, but the rest of the ingredients are not that bad at all. But it's definitely great that they have a nice quality of life way of saving out and restoring all of these skill sets at the cost of just a few skill orbs. I know I've got plenty of skill orbs, and I really haven't messed with making different builds, partly because it's just kind of a pain. And I'm kind of lazy like that. You know what I mean? And speaking of lazy, well, this one helps out quite a bit in that area too. Another nice quality of life block. This one is the identification stand. And, well, as you can see by the piece of vault gear on the very top, it helps to identify vault gear. So in my inventory down here on my hotbar, I have 3 unidentified pieces of vault gear. And when I click the identification stand, all at once, they are all identified. No more having to wait and listen to the little ding, 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 dings in order to identify each piece of vault gear. Now, it's a little satisfying to do that, yes, but after you've done it a whole bunch, it kind of just gets annoying, especially when you're trying to craft some new gear and looking for the good stuff. And so the vault identification stand is another really nice quality of life block to help us out. Now when it comes to crafting this guy, it's also a pretty easy craft, needing a few vault diamonds, but it also needs this new item called an identification tome, which again needs some vault diamonds. So what is a vault identification tome? The identification tome can be used in a very similar manner as the identification stand. By holding this book in your offhand, it'll instantly identify any single piece of vault gear. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, again with no ding 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 ding. But it does have to be used on each piece of vault gear. But the nice thing is that the vault tome, needing only a couple vault diamonds, is accessible a little more early game than the vault stand. But to be fair, 5 vault diamonds isn't that hard to get. Now this next one on my left here is the Vault Enchanter, which is another amazing block that is a quality of life block and helps us to be a little bit more lazy. Putting a piece of gear into the Vault Enchanter gives you a list of all of the max level enchants that can be applied to that particular item. So in this case I can have Unbreaking and Looting. So it looks like that initial step of going through and getting librarians and doing all the trade cycling to get the best enchantments is now completely moot. And actually, I'm all for it. This is a really big quality of life change. And not to mention the cost is really, really good. So all you need are 5 emeralds and 1 level, and boom, we can add this to my sword. Nice. And it doesn't have to be vault gear either. Here we got a plain old vanilla netherite pick, and you can see all of the things that we can add to it. So I can add my fortune to it. Boom. The red lettering here is saying that we can't have both Silk Touch and Fortune, but very easily we can replace the Fortune on here with Silk Touch. which is a pretty amazing thing because even with the pickaxe all done up with all of the other enchantments, I can just swap out that Silk Touch for Fortune on there and not have to redo absolutely everything. So nice, and I really wish that vanilla Minecraft would add this. I mean, I know that's never going to be a thing, but wow, this is nice indeed. And in sticking with the theme, the Vault Enchanter is not that expensive either. Obviously, it requires an enchanting table to start with, and then a couple blocks of chromatic iron and some other stuff. Pretty inexpensive if you ask me. And this last one here is an alchemy table. And alchemy tables are used in order to work with vault potions. Vault potions, you say? What are those? Well, we'll get back to those a little bit later, but just know that the alchemy table here is used to work with them. And now it's on to a few changes related to vault gear and the gear crafting. First off, the proficiencies here in the Vault Forge are getting a change in how they're calculated. As of update 8, your proficiency is calculated in a straight linear fashion, meaning every time you craft a piece of gear, you get a fixed amount added to your proficiency, and it's pretty low, like 0.1% or something. But now with update 9, it's more of an exponential curve, meaning you need fewer pieces of gear in order to attain lower proficiency levels, and as you get higher up, you need more and more and more pieces of gear in order to advance to that next proficiency level. It kind of makes sense. I would say real world is kind of like that. Now the nice thing is you don't get penalized for all of the crafting that you did prior to update 9. Pulling out some numbers here, but if you had like a 0.5 proficiency before installing update 9, you've got something more like a 1 or 1.5 proficiency afterward, meaning you get credit for the things that you've crafted before applying the new scale. Another big change is that axes and swords now have the same base damage levels. So if you look at these two that I've just crafted, they're both in the 13 to 24 range. And well, that's another change too, in that the Artisan Station now shows you a total range of values for the modifier that you're looking at. So again, in this case, we're looking at damage range of 13 to 24, but it doesn't highlight which tiers there are. If you do actually want to see the tier that you rolled when looking at the piece of gear, hold the Alt key as well, and you can see this sword is a tier 3, while the axe is a tier 5. Good to know. But why would they nerf axes like this? Axes have always done more damage than swords. And that's because axes now have an increased range. You see, this one has an attack range of 0.69, meaning every axe has an increased attack range, which honestly is a little counterintuitive. Why would axes give you more range than swords? I don't really get it. I guess they're pole axes or something? I don't know. But that's how they wanted to differentiate axes and swords. Not in damage, in range. Now range is very useful, and you can see that this sword also has a bonus attack range as a suffix. But presumably the same could be had for axes as well. But what hasn't changed is the speed of axes is still slower than swords. Another thing to consider is that the base damage of weapons has been greatly reduced compared to that before update 9. You see, this particular axe has a damage modifier as a prefix, and that damage modifier is higher than the base damage itself. Now, one of the other changes that they've made here is that because most of your damage is now coming from a modifier, and because chaining, cleaving, and attack damage are all mutually exclusive modifiers, which means if you want chaining, you're going to have to go with a lot less damage on each stroke. I guess it's all part of the balancing, but honestly I find it a little annoying. But it also seems like there's a lot of skills that can really help make up that damage difference, which again, we'll look at later. Another big thing to look at is that Thorns is now an implicit part of Shield. Yeah, look at that. It does 16 Thorns damage with a 14% Thorns chance. That's right, the Thorns damage is not based on your weapon. Nope, it's only based on the shield itself. But the nice thing is that every shield has some Thorns damage associated with it and some Thorns chance. And the only place you'll get Thorns bonuses is on shields as well. So you have to go with a shield if you're going with the Thorns build. I think this was the case beforehand as well. The big change here is that they disassociated the damage from Thorns from your weapons. Another thing to get a revamp is Soul Shards and the Black Market. Now first off, the Soul Shard drop rate has been greatly improved in the vaults. Like 1,000% more shards from each mob that you kill. But only the first wave of mobs from the spawner will drop shards. If the spawner is an infinite spawner, none of the other ones will. And because of this, the soul shard drop rate on gear and other modifiers has been greatly reduced as well. Now, as far as the black market goes, this gamble is now a lot more expensive. 1,500 shards versus 350 previously. Based on the look of these prices here, I don't think the prices of the individual items have changed all that much. But one thing they did do is remove all of the ingredient items from the pool of gambling items, which means that when you do gamble, you're much more likely to get something quite nice. As for the items over here, buying one doesn't recycle everything. It just makes it go out of stock. Now this stock will replenish though after 2 hours. So as long as you keep coming back, you can keep buying the same item over and over and over again. But the rest of the items, well, they only reset once every 24 hours just like before. So all in all, we should be getting a lot more soul shards now than before, and they should be going a little bit farther. But unfortunately, that means we can't buy as much in the store because the store doesn't reset as often as it does. So we'll probably be going with a lot more gambles. And this may or may not be a good thing. I don't know. We'll have to see what we get from a gamble. So for experiment's sake, let's do a gamble right now and, a fundamental focus. Now that's hardly a representative test, but that was indeed worth the gamble. Now what kind of update would we have if it didn't have a whole bunch of changes to the vaults? So let's get suited up and get into a vault and see what some of those are. And wow, right off the bat, I can see that the thing at the top, the elixir vault, is much more ornate and much more interesting to look at. So, yep, there's one right there. And this honey theme showcases another change. Pretty much all of the liquids inside the vaults have been removed, or at least the giant pools of them. There's a pool down here, but it is only 1 block deep. All pools should be at most 1 block deep. Another change is that mobs should be able to pathfind through water. So let's put down a bunch of water and trigger this spawner in order to see that this is the case. And yep, he doesn't have any problem fighting that water in order to get to me. Now you might have missed that this one was a fizzle spawner, but the fact is, all POIs in all vaults should now be fizzle spawners. The only ones that are infinite spawners are in the vault dungeons, which makes the dungeon loot just a little bit harder to get than it is otherwise. Oh, this is another example of one of the new mechanics. Mobs now spawn in different kinds of groups, which have different abilities and traits. These mobs are extremely chunky. Look at that, 400 hit points, and he's burping up some kind of poison. They aren't doing that much damage, though. There are 4 different kinds of spawn types. Tank, which we just saw some of. Horde, which generate a whole bunch of weak monsters. Assassins, which generate just a very few but very damaging monsters. And then a mixed set, which is what you'll find in most of the normal POIs. But the intent here is to add more variety to the vaults and make it more interesting. Do you see the purple particles around that spider? That's an indication that that one will drop soul shards. Only the mobs that have purple particles around them will drop soul shards. And if you look down in the corner there, we got 33 soul shards right there. That's a lot more soul shards than we would normally get. There's also supposed to be a lot more variety of mobs. This must be an example of a horde type. Very easy to kill, lots of them, and you don't want to get yourself trapped if you're fighting this kind of mob. Whew! That was a lot. Another thing to demonstrate is that insta-mining should be much more readily available to everybody. Boom! That is very satisfying, and that is the reason why they do it. Now this pick only has living affinity and a little bit of mining speed from a gem that I happen to already have, but efficiency. Having a vault tool with the affinity and efficiency 5 should be enough to insta-mine any chest in the vault. Oh, so satisfying. There certainly is a lot more variety to the mobs than we're seeing. They have a lot of different characteristics, and they all look a little differently than they used to. And it does. It's adding a lot more variety to the game, I feel. Obviously, for a horde type of mob, chaining is going to be really, really effective here. It might be worthwhile to actually bring in more than one type of weapon, because you're going to start running into more than one type of mob. But you see this box here? Yep, that one looks a little bit different. And that's because this is a strong box. Strong boxes can't be insta-mined like their normal chest counterparts. Again, insta-mining only requires efficiency 5 and the appropriate affinity. But even with the appropriate affinity, I'm not insta-mining this box. Now it is going quite fast. They break like the wooden chests do, meaning the whole thing breaks at once. But when it comes to adding mining speed to your vault tools, yep, those things are the reasons why you would want mining speed. Scavenger hunt vaults are also supposed to be a little bit easier between their introduction and level 75. At level 75, they become the same as they are currently, but because they push back the scavenger vaults until much later in the overall progression, they decided to make the amount of items that you need a little easier when you first get started. Now this looks like another new change. There's another new theme. This one is called the Mushroom Wood theme. Ooh, nice and lush. I think I like it. It's definitely nice to have a new theme in the vaults. They were definitely starting to feel quite a bit samey, and a lot of them were caves. This is very nice because it is clearly not a cave. Oh, it looks like there's another new theme. This is the Easter theme. And there's these little Easter eggs hidden all over the place. Well, not hidden, scattered all over the place. When you go into dungeons, you need to be on the lookout for another new block. This is the Alchemy Archive, and much like the Modifier Archive that we had previously, the Alchemy Archive will give you access to new modifiers that can be accessed through the Alchemy table. But again, these archives only appear in dungeons once you get past level 50. Additionally, there is another new variant of the Village Room. This one is quite pretty, with its rainbow-hued walls. Yep, this is the Dawn variant of the Village Room, and down below you'll find a whole bunch of ornate chests. So Dawn gives ornate chests, Day gives living chests, and Night gets gilded chests. It's nice to have all these different variations, and this one looks really pretty indeed. Now, one more minor change in line with all the fluids is that there's no longer any powdered snow or lava within the themes that contain those blocks. Again, I'm not terribly sure why. The lava was definitely annoying, and I'm not going to miss it at all. I think maybe it's because the lava would kill the mobs sometimes and make it easier for you, the player. I don't really know, but it was really annoying when one of the Vault Guardians went into a big old pool of lava, and then how do you get down to the Guardian to kill it and complete the objective? So that's a change that I really think is really good. And even though I didn't find any, it's worth noting that living chests in the vault can sometimes spawn inscriptions that have vault rooms already attached with them. Previously, the inscriptions would always be blank inscriptions, and you had to craft the vault room inscriptions in the inscription table. But apparently you can find them now in the vaults. Like I said, I tried to find some and wasn't able to. They're pretty darn rare to begin with, so I'm not surprised that I didn't find it. But that is a really nice item to find in a chest, so yay for adding that. Now it's time to talk about the updated ways that you can customize your game experience to be how you want to play it. First up is the vault difficulty. We used to have just normal and casual, but now there is also hardcore. Hardcore is basically the same as the 1.16 version, where there are no spirits when you die in the vault. You just lose everything and come back to your spawn point. The devs felt the need to do this because some people do like the extra hard challenge, but when you install Update 9, the vault difficulty gets reset, so if you previously had your difficulty set on casual, you need to make sure and set it back to casual after installing Update 9. The next one is a brand new one called Vault Crystal Mode. And in this, we have several different levels, starting with Infinity, which means that you never have to throw any resources at the vault altar. You just put the crystal on there and press the button. Normal is what we're used to. Grindy is going to require twice the amount of resources that Normal does, and Extreme requires 3 times the amount of resources that Normal does. And this is for those players that just love the grindy aspect of the game. Not everybody does, and the devs realize that, giving us different options for creating crystals. The Infinity mode is for people that hate grinding for resources and just want to run the vaults. So if you find yourself in one of these situations, go ahead and set that game rule and make the game be the way you want it to be. The last new item is Vault Loot, which of course comes in multiple different levels. Normal is where we're at. Plenty gives you twice as much loot in every chest in the vault, and Extreme gives you 3 times as much loot in the chests in the vault. Again, customization, and I feel it's a wonderful thing. And lastly, there's a brand new difficulty level for the game itself. This one isn't a game rule, but a command itself. Update 8 added both Fragged and Impossible to make the game harder, but this one adds Piece of Cake to make the game a lot easier. Piece of Cake scales the mobs up to 25% of their normal values. So for those of you really struggling in the vaults, maybe it's time to adjust that vault difficulty down a notch or two. Remember, just play the game the way you want to play it. Now it's time to talk about another new mechanic to the game, and that is vault potions. We hinted at vault tables before when we talked about the alchemy table. Vault potions are intended to be a healing mechanism that you do outside of combat, basically in the halls or when you're resting in between POIs. They're not intended to take the place of the healing skill, for instance. And to start off, there are two different kinds of vault potions. Well, the lowest level are vials. Vials are pretty easy to make, requiring a chromatic iron ingot, a bottle, and either a poppy for the version that resets after 5 minutes, or a red mushroom for the version that resets after 150 mob kills. That's right, you have to choose whether you want to wait time or mob kills in order to make this vial reset, because a vial only has 6 uses inside the vault. Now it resets when you leave the vault, so this is only while you're inside the vault that you have to worry about the uses. But you only get 6, and according to the tooltip, it heals 4 hit points. There is nothing required in order to be able to craft vials. Vials, of course, can be upgraded, and that, of course, requires a mod unlock. So we have a new mod group over here called Alchemy, and the first level of Alchemy allows you to create potions. These are going to operate much like backpats, where each one requires the previous. The next one will allow you to create mixtures, and the following will allow you to create brews. Now luckily vials, brews, mixtures, etc. don't get used up like they do with normal potions. They just have a timed or limited use inside the vault, so you really only need to create one. Each level is going to heal a few more hit points, 6 for potions, 8 for mixtures, and 10 for brews. But again, at every level you have to choose between a version which will refill after 5 minutes or after 150 mob kills. And as you can see, the brews are pretty darn expensive. Now the big question you may be asking is, why do I even care? Healing potions have worked out just fine for me. Well, that's changed because they don't anymore. Drinking a vanilla potion of healing inside the vault is supposed to give you Valera's wrath. Basically, using vanilla potions makes Valera unhappy. I don't really see anything on my screen to actually indicate that that happened, and that might be a bug, but that's what it's supposed to do. Valera's Wrath is supposed to give you minus 20% healing efficiency, and they stack up to minus 80% total. So after only 4 potions of healing, you get almost no healing effect. So this is why you have healing vials. And I like how it has a little bar down at the bottom on the toolbar to show you how many uses that you've used and how many you have left. Again, when you leave the vault, the vial is completely refilled. So fine, now I've got to use vault potions to heal in the vault. What does this table have to do with anything? Well, first you have to buy the first level of the mod in order to even be able to create the alchemy table. But if you look more closely at the upper level potions, mixtures, and brews, they have suffixes. And you can get additional bonuses on these potions. And it's the alchemy table that lets you get those bonuses. So if I put this brew on here, it looks like we can add 10 to 20% soul chance, knockback resist, mana regeneration, etc. into any of these 3 empty suffixes. And this mechanism is basically the same as the gear modification table, meaning you get to pick the one that you want, and some of them are available and some of them are locked out based on level, or needing to discover them in the archives. Vials don't have any suffixes at all. Potions have 1, mixtures have 2, and brews have 3. So I made up a brew with some suffixes. I've been testing these out a little bit, and it looks like the effects that you get from this brew, meaning 50% mana regen, 8% cooldown, and 15% soul chance, happens once you actually drink the brew. So right now I have no cooldown reduction, I have 100% mana regen, and I have 60% soul chance. And once I drink this potion, I get a new icon up in the upper corner, and now my cooldown reduction is 8, my mana regen is 150, and my soul chance is 75. And yes, apparently those effects go away after a little while. But you do actually get these bonuses while you drink the potion and while the icon is active in the upper corner. So my take on this is that the higher level alchemy just isn't all that useful, or at least not for the modifiers. I mean, I suppose you could maybe make one that has a whole bunch of item quantity or something like that. I don't really know, but 30 seconds for a bit of a buff on a modifier doesn't seem all that useful. But you really don't have any choice if you want to get some healing outside of combat. Regular healing potions bring on Valera's Wrath, and honestly, these guys don't do that much, but it's better than nothing. And lastly, we got a few miscellaneous changes that are still rather noteworthy. First off, the knockback enchantment has been removed from the game. Yep, it was always meant to be disallowed, and there was a spelling error in the files, and that's what allowed it. So now you can no longer put knockback on your swords and axes. There's another new recipe for Vault Alloy, which uses 2 Vaulterite ingots. This is supposed to make recycling your gear feel better as you're using more of your vault scrap. The base mana regen has been brought back up to 100%. It used to be 75% up until this release. And speaking of new recipes, there's a new recipe for cobwebs. Simply take a piece of string and place it onto a vine, and that is replaced with a cobweb, which you can then pick up with a shear or one of the other things. Up until this time, you had to either collect cobwebs from the natural generation of the overworld or use Botania in order to make the cobwebs. So this will help everybody out. Another small change is that the durability of magnets has been greatly increased. Just look at this guy, almost 13,000 durability. Wow, that's a whole lot more than it used to roll. Wow, can you believe all the changes? How long it's taken to go through all of them? My, I had every intention of covering everything in Update 9, but it's just too much. I've been at this all day long, and I want to get this video out to you. And it's already about 30 minutes long just with this. And we haven't even gotten to all the skills. So I think I'm going to take and break the video apart here and make a part 2. I'll start working on that tomorrow, and part 2 will be just the new skills and showing off them. It's really important to me that these update videos get out as soon as possible, and there's a lot of good information in here that I think everybody will enjoy. So with that, I'm going to say so long. We'll pick back up here with part 2 and start showing off all of the new skills. And as usual, if you found this video interesting or helpful, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to me. But that's it for now. Remember, be excellent to each other. I'm out.